UFO sightings and investigations can often seem incredibly unreliable, and due to the boy who cried wolf effect, it's hard to pick out the real events from the hoaxes. So I decided a good place to start would be the UFO documents by governments around the world. In this Sci-Fi, we list off 5 government-documented UFO reports. Number 5, the Portland cover-up. In the FBI records, you will find a section dedicated to UFOs. This is where this story's from. The story comes with more questions than answers, as very little details are given, and most of the names are redacted. I'll leave you to speculate with the information given. On November 5th, 1947, the FBI was notified that local paper, The Oregonian, had reported flying discs in the Portland area, as well as a conference of Army officials regarding the topic. The story states that on June 8th of that year, an unnamed experienced pilot witnessed 10 flying discs in a formation over Bakersfield, California. The aviation editor of the Oregonian claimed the pilot and 4 others, including a co-pilot, a businessman, an aviation editor, and a salesman who also apparently saw the discs, were interviewed as part of an investigation by a captain and a lieutenant from the Army Air Forces. After reaching out to Major General Twining of Ohio to verify the story, the redacted editor gained the impression the investigation was instigated with the intention to wash out the UFO stories, since it was clear the discs did not come from the AAF. This is where things get confusing. On August 1st, only a few days after the interview took place, a plane flown by the captain and lieutenant crashed over Washington and killed both passengers. The United Press published a story alleging the plane was carrying pieces of a flying disc and that pieces of this disc crashed into the boat of 2 residents from Tacoma, Washington. The report then states that the owner of the boat denied the pieces were from a UFO and were rather pieces of metal from the Tacoma slag mill. It then goes on to say there was no more substantive reports of flying discs in the Portland area, and the case was promptly closed. There is speculation that the plane really was carrying pieces of the UFO, and it was sabotaged in order to prevent analysis. What do you think? Does this seem like a cover-up, or is this an example of how the media exaggerates stories, resulting in misinformation? Let me know in the comments below. Number 4, the Falcon Lake case. On Friday, May 19th, 1967, Stephen McCulloch set out on a solo prospecting trip, just as he had many times before. At 9:30 p.m., he checked into a motel nearby and the next morning set out for his trip. Now, I'm not sure if this is an attempt to make Stephen seem unreliable or if the information was necessary for the report. However, the document explicitly says Stephen later added to his story that he stopped for coffee at the bar in the motel before checking in for the night. And the bartender later said he was served beer, not coffee. He also tried to keep the location he went out to a secret. There could be many reasons for this change of information, so I would leave that up to you to decide what you make of it. After working for the morning, Stephen sat down for lunch by a flock of geese in the bushes in front of Falcon Lake. All was going as a typical trip would, until he noticed the geese making an unusually loud fuss. That's when he looked up and noticed 2 large flying saucers directly in front of him. He estimated the saucers to be about 30 feet in diameter and claims one of them even landed just 100 feet in front of him. The landed UFO sat for about 45 minutes, making loud whirling noises and changing in color from silver to gray. A hatch at the top began to open, letting out a bright violet light. Stephen yelled at the ship in English, German, Italian, Polish, and Russian. Instead of a response, the hatch quickly closed back up. Stephen then went up to the device and touched the object just as it began to take off. He was immediately pushed back with an intense force of heat that caused burns to his chest and clothing. He then began vomiting and claims a metallic smell was coming from inside his body. After feeling increasingly sick, he bussed out to a nearby city, Winnipeg, and his son took him to the hospital. When the RCMP investigated the case, he could not find the location it occurred at, and they shut it down. It was, however, later reopened when he was able to locate the area. The reports showed evidence of radioactivity in the soil and on rocks in specific areas near the landing zone, but nowhere else. Stephen's story is quite an interesting one, enough so that he wrote a book about it, though he claims to never have made any money off of the event. The case is still listed as unsolved by the Department of National Defense of Canada. Number 3, a Memorandum of Importance. Not too far into the FBI's UFO records in their online vault, you will find quite an interesting document from July 8, 1947, about an unnamed source. The source is described to have several university degrees and was a former university department head. This is the only information given about the mysterious writer. It begins by stating, quote, "The writer has little expectation that anything of import will be accomplished by this gesture. The mere fact that the data herein were obtained by so-called supernormal means is probably sufficient to ensure its disregard by nearly all persons addressed. Nevertheless, it seems a public duty to make it available." End quote. It then goes on to warn readers of a serious situation that may develop at any time in regards to flying saucers. The writer says should one be attacked, the attacker will almost certainly be destroyed. Before it begins to list off what appears to be collected and researched facts about flying saucers, it addresses that the public mind may panic with the information, but says the data must be offered, quote, "no matter how fantastic and unintelligible it may seem to minds not previously instructed in this thinking time." This is where the document starts to share the quite peculiar and mysterious data. It claims the discs carry crews, but sometimes are under remote control. The mission of the visitors is peaceful, and says they contemplate settling on Earth. They are described to be human-like but much larger in size, and come from another world. It specifically states they do not come from a planet, but rather an etheric world, which means an energy field-like plane that interpenetrates our world and is not visible to us. They apparently travel here simply by materializing on entering the vibratory rate of our matter. The technology these saucers are said to have can disintegrate any attacking ship with a type of ray or radiant energy. Lastly, it claims the ships can most likely not be reached by radio, but it may be possible to reach them by radar if a signal system is set up right. After listing the apparent findings, the memorandum signs off by describing the data as warning, and the writer states they can do no more and hope the document is met with kindness, and says a heavy responsibility rests upon those in authority who are able to understand the information. If the information is true, it's very exciting, but it also makes you wonder what the FBI really knows about these flying saucers. Number 2. The Russian Mishap. This CIA document is originally sourced from a Russian report and underwhelmingly titled "Paper Reports Alleged Evidence of Mishap Involving UFO." It begins by citing the documents to the Mikhail Gorbachev communist Russian government. After the government dissolved in 1991, many documents from the KGB Top Secret Intelligence Administration found their way to different media outlets and foreign governments. Of these documents, a 250-page file on a UFO attack on a military unit in Siberia ended up in the hands of US intelligence. According to the KGB, a military unit was conducting routine training when a low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer appeared overhead. Someone on the ground was supposedly spooked and launched a missile which hit the UFO. The UFO fell to the ground, and from it, 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes exited the saucer. I'm going to quote the recount from the 2 surviving soldiers as stated in the report because there's no better way to describe the incredible encounter. After freeing themselves from the debris, the aliens came close together and then merged into a single object that acquired a spherical shape. The object began to buzz and hiss sharply, and then became brilliant white. In a few seconds, the sphere grew much bigger and exploded by flaring up with an extremely bright light. At that very instant, the 23 soldiers who had watched the phenomenon turned into stone poles. The 2 soldiers who gave the recount were the only 2 survivors, as the explosion apparently missed them. Following the incident, the KGB transferred the petrified soldiers and the remains of the UFO to a secret scientific research institution not far from Moscow. The scientists reported that the energy burst was from an energy unknown to humans. The soldiers were also said to have had the structure of their living organisms transformed into a substance whose molecular composition is closest to limestone. The full 250-page report supposedly contains many photographs, drawings, and testimonies from those involved in the events. CIA representatives who saw the report referred to the case as a horrific picture of revenge on the part of extraterrestrial creatures, a picture that makes one's blood freeze. The CIA signs off the document stating, if the KGB report corresponds to reality, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess such weapons and technology that go beyond all our assumptions. And number 1, Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book has gained more attention recently due to the increase in interest in UFO files. This spike can be cited to the recent video released by the Pentagon showing 2 pilots' encounter with what appears to be a flying saucer. At this point, there is a very good chance you've already seen the video, so it will not be mentioned here. Instead, we are going to go back a bit further in American UFO research history. The project ran from 1947 to its termination in 1969. 1947 is a very important year for those who study UFOs, as it is the year of the infamous Roswell incident. It wouldn't be hard to argue this is what sparked the project. However, interestingly enough, the incident is not mentioned once in the archives of Project Blue Book. There is not even any documents to dispute the claims of the event. It is simply missing completely. The project in total did study 12,618 UFO sightings, and at its closure, 701 of those sightings were still labeled as unidentified. When the project closed, the final conclusions stated: 1. No UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force has ever given any indication of threat to our national security. 2. There has been no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of present-day scientific knowledge. And 3. There has been no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles. The government account claims the United States has not opened any new UFO research projects, as it is too costly. Instead, the government says private research will ensure the information will not get overlooked. All of this information is archived in 42 cubic squares of files. For reference, 1 cubic foot is about 2,000 pages. That's roughly 84,000 pages. The headquarters of the project used to be held at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and it is said that the remains of extraterrestrial visitors are held at this location. However, the government says nothing extraterrestrial is kept here, nor has anything ever been. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to check out my last video, 5 of the strangest black holes ever found. Also, like and subscribe for more videos on all things science and science fiction.